All right. Good
And I've
evening,
lost you,
everybody.
I think.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully, we're not too glitchy at this point. Yeah. So, what was I? We have very few items today because things have been a bit slow in the Cape. A couple of old stories, so nothing to get too excited over. However, I thought we might as well start with something fun and something that's related to the Cape independence movement. So, one of the things that I have been sent by you is a little article from the Citizen, which I have open in a tab over here so that I can jump to it.
Can you? Yeah,
Alrighty then. There we go. There we go. I haven't gone full boomer tonight yet. So I really like this article because it's the stupidest thing I've ever read. So, I mean, there's some extremely basic stuff that Mr. What's his name? Eric Naki, Mr. Knickknacks over here, has gotten wrong. Including that he thinks that Phil Craig is the head of the Cape Independence Party. I mean, the poor bugger didn't even do an interview. He didn't even Google Phil Craig or the Cape Independence Party, which is headed by Jack Miller. No, he just blundered through and stated a really sort of absent opinion based on some chit chat he had with some muhu called Daniel Silk, who I haven't looked up because, well, who cares if honestly.
Well, it's
But
quite shocking because the quotes they use from Phil make it very clear that the Western Cape People's Bill is not an independence bill per se. Yet they still go along with it and treat it as an independence bill. I mean, it's totally bizarre. I mean, the journalistic integrity at the Citizen clearly seems to be quite poor.
well, I think the thing is that Eric Naki, it's not even integrity. I think it's hiring integrity. I mean, if you hire people who are suffering from severe brain damage, then you're going to get content like this. And yeah, so I really don't know what to make of it. I sort of wonder if Amanda over there at the Citizen needs to be needs to be shaken up a little bit. But yeah, the People's Bill's a good thing though, and I mean, like I'm quite excited to be honest because it's back on the agenda now, and it looks like it's going to get tabled. And I think as Phil Craig put it,
Yes,
it's like,
relatively soon as well.
yeah, and as Phil Craig put it, the DA can't really vote against it because this is the only real thing that could give them the legal right to claim powers back and develop provincial autonomy. And this is like their whole raison d'etre, sort of federalism, devolution to the province and so on. So if they don't do this, then what are they doing? They're wasting their time. They're shooting themselves in the foot.
Well, they'll be, demonstrating that they don't really care about federalism. They're far more concerned about finding the quickest and easiest way to obtain national power. Yeah, and it will just show that they've got absolutely no plan B for the Western Cape, and that is quite a concerning thing to consider.
Yeah, but bugger Plan B. I mean, there's nothing in these kind of efforts that actually prevents them from doing well in the 2024 elections at all. And especially now that the DA caucus has slammed the oh shame, poor Robert King's gone off his well, he'll be back in a minute. Anyway, I mean, but since considering that the DA caucus has now slammed the leaders Zilla, Steenhuisen, Simanga, and so on. Jordan Hill Lewis is number 4. So those 4 leaders, they were all for like an ANC coalition, and they'd been making a lot of public noise about it. Of course, I'm sure their internal pollsters told them this was a real losing move, and I know Roman Cabernac jumped on this one, but I sometimes think he's a bit too cozy with DA leadership. No, I think the DA caucus got smart and told told their leadership, no, we don't like this idea. We're not going into coalition with the ANC. We've got to make it work with other coalition partners who we've been trashing for the past 2 years. And then I think I think probably Rob Hasselhoff has exerted a bit of positive influence here. I mean, he's not always on the money. He usually is quite silly in terms of what plans he supports and so on. But um, one of the big scores over here is that he managed to get the Patriotic Alliance on board, and Gayton McKenzie. He was on an interview with Alec Hogg recently, and he decided to play the hatchling and pretend that, oh, so I didn't know, and I was really confused, and I really earnestly believed, and like all of this kind of stuff. And I mean, for Gayton McKenzie, who is by far, oh, welcome back, Robert. For Gayton McKenzie, who's by far one of the the most worldly politicians on our political landscape, former gangster, and not just any gangster, but the 26ers, the money handlers of the numbers gang. For him to then go, I was too trusting of the ANC and so on. I was like, come on, come on, come on. Who's supposed to believe this nonsense? But anyway, it's nice to see that the DA is back on a sensible track. Look, they're probably not going to win. The likelihood is that they're not going to win the 24 elections. If there's the only election that they really stand a chance of getting into government is in 2029. And
There was an
by
interesting article
then,
in Politics Web today about
yeah.
that, saying that the likelihood of us having a functioning constitutional liberal democracy in 2029 is pretty low when you consider a number of factors that might take place in between now and then, especially if we get a more radical ANC EFF coalition government in the meantime. So I wouldn't rest my hopes on the 2029 elections.
No, but I mean, for my money, it's the first one that they really stand any chance. Although the question would be, even if they win that one, I mean, what's going to be left of the country? I mean, if anyone's been following me and my shenanigans for a while, you've seen my my sort of very crude fiscal projections for the next 10 years. And look, best case scenario, the economy completely stagnates and doesn't do anything. Worst case scenario, we hit like debt default or hyperinflation by 2028. So, and I mean, look, these are not like the most radical outcomes. These are just like the ones that are within a reasonable sort of zone of what our economy is capable of. Yeah, it's really not
and the
looking.
question also is, do we go full Zimbabwe in between that time? And obviously we could end up economically like Zimbabwe, but we could also end up politically like Zimbabwe, where you've got an internal African nationalist government, and then you've got an opposition party that's eternally not the opposition. The DA might very well end up like the MDC if the constitutional democracy is weakened during that 5-year time period.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's quite likely that the DA will end up as a permanent opposition anyway, come hell or high water. And the only way that they can really expand their vote is by adopting the ANC's sort of unsustainable welfare spending policies. So, like, I don't really see any hope in that regard.
Well, the DA has been making some moves in that direction. I think I sent it to you a few weeks ago when the DA was threatening to take the ANC to court over a plan to possibly start cutting grants to the population, and the DA was threatening to go to court to stop it.
Yeah. I mean, it's mind-boggling. I mean, at this point, why even try? Why not just stick to your principles and sell it as it is? Say, okay, this is what the shape of things is. Let's face it. What do you really stand to lose? But of course, the DA can't do that. So, I mean, I don't know. But I think I think on the plus side, Cape Independence is kind of is kind of gaining pace on its own. It's not doing too bad. We're ticking the milestones. We've been getting a little bit of attention from sort of low-level international players at the moment. So another couple of years, we should be getting diplomatic contacts, potentially even support. Although again, it relies on what the outcomes of the American election are. But I mean, I've had a tiny bit of
Well,
luck in my
why don't we discuss
regard.
a bit more of your article that you wrote
Oh
about the
yeah.
Cape and its role for the West?
Oh right, I didn't even think of that. I don't know why I totally forgot. Let me just bring it up and so that I can refresh. Oh, bugger! I did that thing again. Hold on. There's a previous draft of it, right? That somehow caused Substack to crash, and for some reason, it's the first suggestion in the it's the first suggestion when I type into the search bar. So I keep getting this. But in editing thing that crashes the tab and then I can't use it. But anyway, so I wrote this here article, and some people will recognize the share. There we go. Some people will recognize some of the graphs that I use. But I use this nice little photo of, the Russian warships and everything with some useless sort of local gesticulating in the foreground. I shared it with someone who is actually in George Bush's cabinet, because he followed me on Twitter, and the guy sort of gave me a positive comment. And so hopefully it'll, some of these ideas will start bouncing around the sort of NATO, big sort of pro-NATO hawkish right in America. And I'll, the Cape will
The
get more on the...
neoconservatives.
There we go. Neoconservatives. That's the word I was looking for. My Swiss cheese brain strikes again. So, I mean, look, the article's not very complicated. So there's a little bit of rhetorical fluff at the beginning. And then I just break it up into, just cardinal directions on the compass. So start with east, going east, and I describe how the ANC has been leaning into the BRICS alliance very hard recently. How they had that cocktail bash, the Russian embassy, when the Donbass was invaded last year. And then I mentioned, the new pattern with military drills. So traditionally, South Africa's taken a supposedly neutral stance, and they do military drills with both sides of the Pacific in these alliances. And you get little drills with America, and you get little drills with China and Russia. But then recently, they've been canceling the American drills, and they've been expanding the drills with the East. And now new naval drills include Iran. So, of course, the Americans rebuked them with a bill that's going nowhere, HR 145. You can look that up. There's lots of very sort of stern and grumpy comments, but unfortunately, they haven't got much traction. Democrats are in charge. No one thinks anything's going to happen. However,
well, I don't think it's more that. I think, look, they've obviously got a lot of distractions as well. I think what's really going to put South Africa at the forefront of the global news space is going to be in August, when Putin visits South Africa for that BRICS summit, because
absolutely.
then the Democratic
And I
Party is
mentioned
going to be in a really uncomfortable position, because they're going to have to contend with, on one side, having those historic loyalties to the ANC, while at the same time having to contend with the current realities of being incredibly pro-Ukraine and anti-Russia. So that's going to be a severe challenge for the Democratic Party, and I think they've probably got more to benefit them from being pro-Ukraine than being pro-ANC, and I think that will force them into a more pro-Cape position as a result.
Yeah. Well, look, this is true. And I mean, some of the things that I mentioned over here is how BRICS has been expanding recently. So now I do, of course, mention Putin's visit. and the fact that the ANC don't plan to do anything with them. But there's an interesting point over here, which is that so BRICS is sort of seen as like this silly, loose agglomeration of Eastern countries, but there's a very, very good thing to pay attention to. It actually consists of a couple of real organizations, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, New Development Bank, and so on. And their membership is sort of overlapping, right? So there's financial institutions, trade institutions, and increasingly bits and pieces of military cooperation. But the new countries that are looking to join are Iran and Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, so on. And I mean, Egypt is interesting because if you combine South Africa and Egypt, you control all of the Atlantic to Indian Ocean trade. So yeah, that's pretty significant shift of power. Now, what's also, so you've also got a former Goldman Sachs chief economist called Lord Jim O'Neill, who has become a cheerleader of de-dollarization. Now, all of these countries that are starting to go China aligned, Saudi Arabia included, are looking to gear their economies away from the dollar, and they're starting to trade in yuan and trade in their own currencies. Now, the dollar is declining pretty sort of steadily across the board in terms of how much trade it represents, but it's still a majority share. So it's not like we're hitting avalanche territory yet. However, that decline is going to accelerate because with a major fulcrum state like Saudi Arabia, it can be seen as a bellwether for the direction of things to come. And so, I mean, I did a little bit of faffing around here where I mentioned what minerals South Africa has, because I thought it was also, because this is an article about geopolitics, South Africa, where it stands, and people forget that we're quite important. Everyone kind of knows we're sort of a mineral-rich country, but there's a nice, concise little paragraph from the Wits Mining Institute. So I just quoted it, and I'll read it out here because it's good for a bit of perspective. So it says, 16 commodities in South Africa ranked in the top 10 internationally. We have the largest reserves of platinum group metals at 88%. Global contribution, manganese at 80%, chromite at 72%, gold 13% of known reserves in the world. We're ranked second in titanium minerals at 10%. Now, titanium, most countries only all have like a little bit because it's present in like beach sand and things like that. But we've got second most. I've also got the second most zirconium, which is useful for some circuitry stuff and obviously jewelry. Then vanadium, lots of weird little engineering and metallurgical purposes for that. Vermiculite, honestly, don't know what that's about. Fluorspar, fluorine is used in a lot of non-organic chemistry processes. Anyway. In addition, the country contains 17% of the world's antimony reserves. The country is ranked in the top 3 globally in terms of production of platinum group metals. Vanadium, ferrochrome as well, very, very important for obvious reasons, steel manufacturing and so on. Aluminosilicates, that's at 60%. Vermiculite, zirconium, titanium minerals. See, when you look at the production end, you see these numbers get really more interesting. So, okay, 88% of proven reserves of PGMs, but only 60% of production. That's due to mining decline. However, you get some interesting ones where, for example, all the other minerals are overrepresented here. Like ferrochrome, we've got not much in terms of proven reserves, but we've got a really, really healthy shipping rate out the Seychelles dollar line. So that does well. Okay, so we've got this position as a major mineral resource producer, and these are essential minerals for a lot of industrial processes. And then we've also got this key trade position as the only alternative to the Suez Canal. So if Egypt decides to go, full bore in a major economic war with the West on behalf of China, they just shut down access to the Suez Canal. And then you have to go around the Cape. And then the question is, well, who controls the Cape? Who controls the seas over there? Well, who is it? Well, it's South Africa. Or if the Cape is independent, it's the Cape. So this is all of a sudden very important. Now, then there's a chapter on how much South Africa sucks and how much it's going down. Little mentions of the expropriation bill, the national health insurance bill, and the district development model. And then, so what shape the corruption is. And then I did this. Then I sort of rehashed my doom spaghetti argument again, where I said, well, okay, you take the Treasury's reported stats of the past decade, adjust for dollar exchange rate and inflation, and project until 2030 based on average growth rates of those indicators for the first 5 years, second 5 years, and decade average. So I just took the best and worst case scenarios, the 2012 to 2017 average growth rate. You get some projections over here. Debt's going to go up. GDP goes down. Projected ratios, well, it kind of most of these things kind of flatline except for debt, which goes way up there, the debt to anything ratio. And then the worst case scenario is over here, where you get, sure, you can have some GDP growth, but debt goes way up here, crosses over with
Well, the question, I
GDP.
guess, is how much of that GDP growth is going to be government expenditure growing?
Well, that's exactly that's kind of your problem. So revenues flatlined, expenditures climbing as well, just marginally. Deficit just sort of starts arcing up under here. Yeah. So, and these numbers are billions of in billions of dollars, US dollars. This is the really scary bit, because there's a ratio over here, this 40%, this yellow line called this is the deficit to expenditure ratio. Now, there's a guy called Peter Bernhardt, who's an Austrian school economist. And he basically did all the studies of hyperinflation throughout the 20th century and said, if you cross that line with that ratio, there's no country that's lasted a year doing that. You just do not survive. You either default on all your debts or you print them away. So, yeah, once we hit 2030, we're going to be bye-bye. So, and actually it kind of crosses the line at late 2028 in this model. But remember, this is extremely crude. Nobody take this as serious economic projections. This is really just back of the envelope stuff. So don't get too excited. However, I do think that the sort of rough ballpark you got to think of this in rough ballpark terms, and I do think that we are headed for a real fiscal cliff this decade. So,
well, I've heard a number of economists in private who've said that as well. But I mean, the thing is, even if these statistics might in reality be delayed by a few years, if you have an ANC EFF coalition that comes to power, they start implementing all those radical left-wing economic policies. It might even bring the timeline forward rather than what you're currently projecting at the moment.
Absolutely. I think the next section of the article I go through mainly. So, what are our relations to the West? So, okay, forget South Africa and its trade balance. I went, okay, so where does this leave the Cape? So we got 99% of the new jobs for the last year. We're outstripped Gauteng in the construction sector. The DA is heavily pro-Western. They've got a pro-Western foreign policy against the national policy. They've got special provincial trade and aid deals with the United States. Demographics are different. And then there's a nice little link to a Catalonian outlet that published an article on Cape Independence. The guy who wrote the article actually contacted me to talk about this for an expanded version he's doing for Palladium magazine. But I think he's gotten all the points right anyway, so and then I just briefly mentioned the fact that we've got the purest deposit of rare earth minerals known in the world, and it's untapped, and that's up in Steenkampskraal. It's more than 10 times the purity that you find anywhere else in the world. So, yeah, very, very good mineral investment there. We've also got good quantities of natural gas, and we got good quantities of uranium. Not world-class quantities of uranium, but enough to supply a local power generation industry if we wanted it. So, yeah, and then the People's Bill's moving to the legislature, and then there's the devolution. Western Cape Devolution Working Group, which, well, it's been doing pretty good at pushing the DA to do actually semi-serious moves on devolving power. Of course, the hefty amount of research I did for that group has apparently gone little used. Well, I mean, who wants to read a 99-page document anyway? So grumble,
Look, there's
grumble,
certainly
grumble.
going to be a lot of exciting potential, I guess, after 2024 as well, when we hopefully see the DA lose their majority and then have to go into coalition with either the VF Plus or the Cape Independence Party or both. Then there's a lot more exciting opportunities there also to push for devolution and federalism and all these exciting ideas in the short term, like a provincial security company.
Yeah. I don't know. It just seems to me that they're ignoring a lot of low hanging fruit. But for me, I just sort of tried to sketch out a really ambitious plan when I got to the end of the article. Just something spicy for the Americans, And I thought, well, okay, if you want
Yeah,
to
not
break
saying
up
too
South Africa,
spicy, hopefully.
no, but just sort of like really ambitious stuff. So I went for okay, so let's say you get Cape Independence happening. All it really needs is international recognition. And I mean, you barely need to breathe any pressure on the DA, and they'll jump to and make moves. If you're the United States, so you know. Okay, so
And remember, they
then I
were
mentioned,
trying to leverage support at the sorry about that at the beginning of the year, or beginning of last year,
right.
sorry, with the whole Ukrainian
Mm,
invasion. Displaying the Ukrainian flag on government buildings in the Western Cape, and part of that did get them some recognition from the United States. I think they got a call out
yeah.
from the US ambassador at the United Nations, and part of that was quite clearly part of the DA strategy to
Mm.
leverage it and trying to get a coalition with the ANC after 2024. But
Yeah, I
obviously,
remember
it
that.
was
Yeah,
made
that was
quite
very
clear. I
good.
think in a BizNews interview, it was mentioned to Jordan Hill Lewis, though, that the Russian government, as a result of that, is not too keen on the ANC going into coalition with the DA. So clearly, you've actually got a bit of a proxy war almost going on there between now the Russian state backed by the ANC and then the DA, who's trying to get that US support there.
Yeah, no, I mean they're kind of silly in that regard. So yeah, they don't think in terms of more than one or two dimensions at a time. But for my money, it's really simple because I mean these cleavage lines are so clear. But for my money, I thought, well, because I mean recently, I mean it's like a month or two ago, but I read a book on let me pull it out because it's still sitting here. Um, let me see if you guys can see this. This is probably actually. Let me just do this quickly. There. Okay, so the Unification of South Africa by L.M. Thompson. So it's an old book; it's out of print, but if you can get it secondhand, please do. And yeah, that whole book is fantastic. It's one of the most interesting periods of South African history in terms of power relations, but it's a really dry book, so very detailed. But what it goes into, I think, which is very interesting, is this power struggle that happened in those 8 years between Natal, Transvaal, and the Cape. And the thing is that Natal and the Cape were both dependent on their for their economies on the export of minerals from the Transvaal, and the main rail company that owned all the rails wanted to keep making money off tariffs. So there was a tariff war between these two ports and the rail companies, and people were undercutting each other and everything. And the Transvaal, what they did is they decided, okay, well, we're just going to send our stuff out to Maputo because it's a very short distance away. And they threatened to leave the customs union. And so the British managed to organize a union conference, and immediately everyone realized the stakes, because you get, if you're an Afrikaner, your people are the majority. So you get, the chance to basically remake all of the institutions in your image. The British liked it because it gave them a chance to import British people from the UK, which didn't really come to pass. And first and foremost, it kept that balance of power where the flow of minerals is maintained, because Transvaal is very far from any ports. It's landlocked, right? But over here, we have the same problem again. So our ports have become very inefficient. And down over here is an interesting thing. So this is South Africa's exports to Mozambique. So since 2016, it's basically tripled. Our exports are basically tripled. And it's not because like Mozambique has become some, consumer powerhouse. It's because Maputo is functioning and Durban is not. And okay, this map is a little out of date. It's from 2017, but it shows the amounts of traffic that are going to the various ports. Yeah, the thickness of the line is, so you can see over there, Sishen Saldana, that's mainly iron ore. You've got various amounts of manufactured goods going down and out through Cape Town, as well as some agricultural products. Same for Durban. Richards Bay gets a lot of mineral products, mainly coal. Kucha as well gets a few mineral exports. They have a big. Then there's also your container terminals over here, here, and here. Now, the thing is, if you can peel off the Cape gets independence, and then you can peel off the Zulu, and they get independence. Then you've essentially captured around more, I think more than half. So here, this little artery over here, this is 2/3 of our trade. Okay. Sorry, our internal trade, like the internal economy of South Africa, the internal trade there in South Africa, that's 60% over here. And this, this I think is that's another 20%, maybe 30%. So you can basically completely encircle the South African economy by peeling off these two provinces. And they're both not impossible.
And not just South Africa. I mean, you've also got control then, or a lot of influence over Botswana, Zimbabwe, maybe even Zambia, as a result of that.
Yeah, because I mean, look, the amount of money that these countries surrounding us are getting as part of the SADC trade deal, because they take the what's it called, the customs duties that come into SADC, right? And most of their revenue, in some cases, I think Namibia, it's like 2/3 or something obscene. All of the countries, it's at least a major plurality of their government revenue comes from those taxes that they can put on those goods because of the South African market. You shut down those ports, and you don't have to actually shut them down. You just have to have the threat of doing so, right? The amount of leverage you have over the whole of the subcontinent is immeasurable. It's, that kind of leverage is extraordinary. And then here's the thing: you say, well, maybe they can go to Maputo. At least some of that sort of some of those fat lines over there can move over to here, because this line will be fatter now. This thing is 6 years out of date. But here's the thing: Mozambique is relying on the United States to prosecute a low-level conflict in the north at Cabo Delgado against Islamist militants. So you've kind of you can capture all three of these major outlets and completely surround South Africa. And the thing is, the capacity at Kucha, or Ngura, as it is now called, is really poor, and they can't expand it. I mean, our capacity to buffer these little ports down in the Eastern Cape, 0. So you can just basically, if you can get the Western Cape and Zululand independent, then, between the two of you, you can basically tell Pretoria what to do. I mean, that's as simple as that.
Yeah, and if you really want to, make things difficult, we can see this during the riots that took place in 2021. I just remember how much panic and concern there was about those important highways connecting Durban to Johannesburg being blocked off and the consequences of that. So just imagine, for example, if you're the United States and you've had your history of interfering in the internal affairs of hostile countries. If you wanted to cut off that final port that South Africa's got in Port Elizabeth, then all you need to do is, instigate maybe some EFF conflict in the area around the city, and then you've
There's no
basically,
need to do
there's
that.
no supply.
The thing is, there's no need to get involved in any kind of crazy, hairy nonsense. All of this can be done through diplomacy. I mean, that's the magic of it. There's no need for America to do any dumb stuff that costs too much money. They literally just have to talk to people, maybe chuck the occasional R1 million into some party coffers. And what they've got is they capture the whole subcontinent. They secure the southern route to India. They secure the free flow of essential minerals in the global economy. I mean, that's all of the main aims of and interests of the global community, as they like to call themselves, completely fulfilled. And if for my money, it also fulfills our needs, which is to not be ruled by the ANC and their similar cohorts. I think, yeah, it's for me, it's just like a no-brainer. I don't know why America thinks like the way they do about these things. It's just it's too obvious. It's like lying there, you know.
Well, I guess a part of it just requires some things in the Cape to get into order, and then I'm sure there are certain maybe diplomats in certain places in Washington DC just keeping an eye on what's going down here and waiting to see what thing triggers the process, like a snowball effect.
Yeah. Well, it remains to be seen what's going to go down. I think a lot of people would also benefit from this if they were living in the interior as minorities. Because let's say you're living in Ankerdorp, you're doing the whole sort of Orania thing, you're doing AfriForum sort of self-bestuur business. You're going to benefit from this because the pressure on the government in Pretoria to behave themselves now that they're a almost landlocked country will be enormous. It will be enormous. And, decades into the future, when once they've been forced to get their act together, whatever minorities are still banging around will probably be conducting some of the infrastructure projects through the Eastern Cape. And, you can direct some actual economic growth there and get some stability. Sorry, I picked up an awful bug when I was on my way to Namibia, and the cough just has not gone away. It's nasty. Anyway, no, I think, look, let's get done with the geopolitics, because as fun as it is, yeah, go on.
Well, I've got a good story here. So obviously, we've dipped into stage 8 load shedding last week. I think we'd lost so much power that although it wasn't officially stage 8, it was technically stage 8. But I think there's now fears that in the next few weeks, especially in the lead up to winter, we're going to see stage 8 load shedding again. But I've just seen this headline. Obviously, the way we deal with load shedding isn't through infrastructure development, isn't through rooting out the corruption. It's none of that. Apparently, there are now calls again for the EFF to do another national shutdown in order to combat stage 8 load shedding. This is what's being reported in IOL at the moment. There's talk about another shutdown to prevent load shedding from escalating. So thank God we've got these fighters here in South Africa. We really would have nothing to do without them.
It's just so tiresome. What are these clowns doing? I don't understand. But I mean, they managed to spin it well enough for their own supporters, so good for them.
Yeah.
Even if they made clowns of themselves in the eyes of everyone else. But for my money, here's the bit where the foreigners' eyes are going to glaze over if they're watching this, and that's what's going on in the rest of the province. No, okay. Someone commented and says Rob looks tired. No, I'm actually fine. It's just hearing about what the EFF are up to. It's flipping tiresome because it's stupid and it's hateful and it's pointless and it's disruptive, and there's just nothing ever comes of it until they get in government, in which case things just get liquidated, people's money gets stolen.
Yeah, that's the scary thing. They do think they're so stupid in how they act. Your opinion of them drops so much, and then you start to underestimate them as a political party, and then that's when they really come and bite you. So it's good to laugh at these things, but always have a watchful eye on what the EFF is doing, because they're the third largest party. Clearly, they've got some influence, even if they can't necessarily get out onto the streets.
Yeah, no, that's true. But I mean, while we're busy talking about political parties doing naughty nonsense, I thought we'd go into a bit of our own local news and just pretend the rest of South Africa doesn't exist for a minute. And so, news in the Cape. I think for me, the big one would be the ongoing saga with Malusi Booi, which is let me try and do this without going full boomer. Wapapa, Mr. Booi, hello. There's that glazed expression. Bloody hell, there's a donut if I ever saw one. So anyway, Mr. Man over here has been caught. So finally, the police have got around to investigate him for ties to the 28 gang. And so that one for me, the problem with that is, so our dear friend with the Cape Coloured Congress, another one of our independistas over here, has been trying to point this out for a long time. Fadil Adams, and Fadil, he's been. Well, I mean, look, he's not the best at running at sort of running complex organizations. But one thing you can always say for him is that he's very principled. He's very committed. And his point, he's been pointing out this corrupt relationship for a long time, and it's because he was a minister of human settlements. And what that means is that basically he runs all the housing projects. So, Ralph Stanfield, he, the head of the 28s, he was, he'd gotten this sort of shell company that was running through his wife called Globex or something like that. And they'd been handling some of the bigger contracts in Cape Town for housing. And it's now been known since like 2019, so that's 4 years ago, that this corrupt relationship had been established. The DA went completely silent, didn't have any problem with it, wouldn't investigate it, didn't listen to queries on it. And now that the police raid the man's office, they get, we're taking this very seriously, and they had him fired. But it's probably going to be a bit stickier than that, because housing is a big pressure point that people go after the DA for. I think at some other time, it might be worth going into some of the other allegations against them. But for now, I think it's always been construction sector. Knysna's a bit different. There's tourism involved in their sort of shenanigans, but the man who's making this
a bit more of a complicated municipality, because it keeps on going back and forth between the ANC and the DA as well. So your administration is constantly changing.
That's true.
Actually, I saw a story recently in Knysna. I think there were concerns there because the administration went over to the ANC. They did a dodgy deal with Russia, and then I think there were fears emerging in the Western Cape government that Knysna was going to be used to money launder for the Russian government. So there was a really bizarre story going around
Well,
there.
it'll make a change from government monies being used to fund private debts for a company that the DA has placed its head members on. Although that's kind of an old story now. They quietly shelved that and replaced that that complex a while ago. So Mike Hampton, as embattled as he is probably fighting. He's fighting a lost battle, the poor bugger. And unfortunately writes really terribly. So getting through his book and trying to sift facts from fluff was just tiresome. Anyway, that's a story for another day. What? Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff that's a bit more DA friendly, however, which is that Kanaland and 4 other municipalities are in deep shit over their inability to spend treasury funding correctly. So they've had their...
Looks like mostly opposition-controlled municipalities as well.
Correct. And for me, the Kanaland situation, that's one that I feel particularly angry about because there's a local party over there that managed to maneuver its way into the coalition at the charge. And the guy in charge there, the guy that was made mayor of Kanaland, is a child rapist. And a known child rapist. It's not like he's convicted of it. It's not something that you can sort of, you have to soft pedal in case of libel. He is a child rapist. And
he was convicted, but he's been a councillor for like more than a decade anyway.
Correct.
I think this was back in the early 2000s. He's been a councillor since then. The party he had, ICORSA, they've been winning elections in Kanaland, at least I think for the last 10 years or so. I mean, for some reason, people in Kanaland seem to really like whatever they stand for in that party. I'm not really sure what it is, but yeah.
Honestly, I don't care.
Place.
That man's an animal and needs to be buried under the flipping prison. And the fact that they're having their funds cut off by the Treasury, that makes me feel very good. Unfortunately, if you do know the way that sort of the various spheres of government work in South Africa, you'll know that so each sphere of government is supposed to get like an equitable share of national revenue. So you get national gets a third, provincial gets a third, local gets a third. But the way that the local governments make that up is they have their local rates for electricity, water, property tax, things like that. And that makes up about 80 to 90%, depending where you are. So it's the majority of their funds come from their own fundraising capacity. And the remainder is made up by treasury grants. So when sorry, someone's making flippant comments that were vaguely amusing. Anyway, the problem with the Treasury cutting off the supply is it doesn't squash the municipality the way it ought to, we're going to be stuck with these people. Raping the constituents for some time to come.
But it's also bizarre because the ANC was, I remember at the DA's load shedding march, Worldview got an interview with Cameron Dugmore, and Cameron Dugmore was talking about it was either the city of Cape Town or the Western Cape government that was sending money back to the national government that had been allocated for housing. Apparently, millions of rands had.
But in defense of the DA here, in defense of the DA over here. Look, if you're underspending by like 1 or 2 million, that's negligible, and you have to.
Well, it was a billion rand budget, and they were getting about 10 or 20 million that they weren't spending. But it's a billion rand budget. I mean, would you rather the government overspend your money or underspend your money? I mean, it's quite obvious which one you'd rather have.
Right, but I mean, look, these municipalities have been underspending their treasury grants by like 60%. So there's, and they haven't been making any of their financial reports on time. And
you've got to ask, Cameron Dugmore that question.
Yeah, but I mean, like Cameron Dugmore, I mean, look, I mean, I know they don't have much to choose from when looking for whiteys in the party, but deploying a guy that looks like a frog is, if you're trying to escape the slimy image, why would you use Dugmore? I don't know.
Well, it was Cameron Dugmore Colney House, so I mean, I guess he was the lesser of two evils.
Call me out. Shame. I feel sorry for that guy so much.
Yeah,
Ah,
well, he's
I
got his new
do.
party set up that he's currently pushing ahead with.
What
But
was it
yeah, I
called?
mean, he
Thing?
keeps
I can't remember what it was called. I just remember what was on the group
the
chat when everyone was
African
calling it the
Radical
retard.
Transformation. Yeah, it was something like the African Radical Transformation Alliance or something along those lines. But I mean, the sad thing about Coldy House is that he keeps on getting prank called by a certain group of people. We haven't really, identified who they are, but he always ends up
Hmm.
prank called.
Yes, I think the man should be a bit more careful about giving his number out. So, yeah, no. Sherbet. But yeah, no, I think one of the things that we're lacking over here is, um, I'm getting a certain serious look. Um, so which means that supper is ready.
Well, I
I
think
think
let's
we've
do this
managed.
a short episode tonight because I
Yeah,
think, I mean, I've got load shedding at the moment. Yeah, I mean, we just have to see how, the situation continues with ESCOM because, I mean, I think we're
yeah.
going
I
to go
think.
worse in stage 8 in winter.
Oh yeah, and I mean, like again, we have to wait for Alan Windy to be able to procure more than 750 megawatts, which is like, oh, that's going to be delivered in 2 years. Ah, great, man, well done. I mean,
Well, I
you'd
had an
think with all
interesting
of
chat with him
you
over the
did.
week at an event
Oh
in
yes, yes,
Cape Town.
this one. Okay.
So yeah, look,
Well,
I won't go
would you
into what
care
was
to?
discussed. Well,
Oh
I,
yes,
look, I can just because it's it was not on record. So, but I mean,
no.
I'll just say I'll just reconfirm what has been stated in the past. So he's doubling down on things like independence not being possible. He's under this bizarre impression that if the Western Cape gets independence, then Hout Bay might declare independence from the Western Cape, and Neisner might declare independence from the Western Cape, and the Cape Coloured Congress might take over the Western Cape, and then all the DA-run municipalities in the Western Cape will try and secede from the province. And the only way you respond to that question is, well, when has that ever happened before with a secession? Has the country just disintegrated along political lines like that? Of course, it
No,
hasn't.
if anything,
Um,
if
yeah,
anything, after a secession, you get an upwelling of national feeling through this event that generates national consciousness, and you get much more stable government. But anyway, I think just quickly before we run away, let's just deal with any questions that may have come up. I'm just trying to see if there's been any um, decent questions. Will an independent Cape pursue a navy? Yes, I think the Western Cape will definitely be a naval power. I
well, you've
it's
got to have one if you're controlling one of the most important trade routes around the world. I mean, you've got to defend it in some way. I mean, I think at the moment we've had a number of infiltrations by Chinese vessels, illegal infiltrations into our
yeah.
waters by Chinese fishing vessels.
Mm.
That's happened over the years. And also, the other thing to remember about the Cape is that we do have, I don't know how many naval ports we've got in South Africa, but we've definitely got one of the most important ones in Simonstown.
Yeah, and
Although,
all of our real fishing waters, most of our fishing waters are here in the Western Cape. There's a bit on the East Coast, but that's most of that's seasonal. So, yeah, no, it's going to be a naval power, and I think the other thing about this is very interesting. Is most people forget Prince Edward Island is technically administrated by the city of Cape Town. And what that means is that we're also going to get a huge bit of continental shelf, that gives us dominance over most of the waters that any international shipping would pass through. So that's just a nice little bonus bit of trivia for anyone keen on the speculation. There's a couple of clever comments about about the yuan, and saying, doesn't the Frederick von Abel saying, doesn't the yuan not being a freely traded currency impact its ability to replace the dollar as the world's reserve currency? I'd say, yeah, probably. But I mean, I don't know why they're not using the renminbi. For me, this doesn't make sense. Perhaps it's because they have more sort of executive control over it. I don't know, but it seems to me that if you have the political will and you really want to stick it to the Americans, and you realize now is the time, you're going to be less shrewd about quibbling about the details. And what you'll notice with people who end up dealing with China is that the fact that they're dealing with China in the first place means that they're going to get run roughshod over anyway. So, I mean, look at Sri Lanka. Look at literally anyone who's taken part in that whole string of pearls or Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, they get shanked. It's it's a pound of flesh for every mile of road. So, look, these
Also, I
people.
think it's suicide for all these countries to go into an alliance with a country that is rapidly going to see population decline over the next few decades. I mean, especially with an aging population at the same time, it's going to be a
And
very
they don't.
difficult situation to contend with that debt crisis.
Correct. I mean, look, the thing is, it wouldn't necessarily be. It's just because of the peculiar state of Chinese finance. So instead of having like this distributed system of investments that the other East Asian countries have, that means that pensions are invested in all kinds of different industries and things, and overseas currencies and funny stuff. So there's lots of diversification. The Chinese don't really have that system. So what they do is they invest in property. And of course, property market growth is dependent on population growth. So they've kind of invested themselves into being completely screwed. So that's really the reason that they're screwed. It's not so much the population collapse on its own. It's more just the weird way in which their pension schemes work. But before we get too sucked into China, another question. What outside power would you want to partner with an independent Cape? Presumably in the brave new world we're moving into, shipping is going to need protection from pirates and drones. Agreed. But in general, you're going to need partnerships anyway. You have to side with one or the other sort of major power. And for my money, look, there's only two choices. There's the United States and there's China. I'm going with the United States. I don't like everything that they're up to. I don't like that progressivism. I don't like some of their bullying tactics, but I mean, it's far better than literally putting your head into the crocodile's mouth and saying, yeah, I'm going to go with China because I'm feeling harakat. No. It's a no-brainer. Let's see if there's any other little questions.
So we just add, I mean, also in the US sphere of influence of the Netherlands. And the Netherlands, not only do they have a historical connection to South Africa, but they've also got their quite large shipping industry too. So there's also that advantage that we get.
Yeah, I don't know what to say there, but yeah, I mean, for me, I like once I've made a decision, I stop looking at the details. So for my money, it's okay. Well, okay, we're going with the United States. The question is no longer whether we're going with the United States, but more like how do we actually manage that relationship in a way that we don't get completely reamed? That's the tricky one. So that's going to mean a lot of careful sort of lobbying and partnership building, in the United States itself, in Europe, and so on. Potentially with Australia, but I'd be careful of Australia because Australia is weird. So their lefties are clean but nuts, and their right wing is sort of sane but absolutely devoid of morality. So yeah, very, very corrupt fellas. So
also, a lot
I
of
don't know
their
where.
TV media is quite strange. It's like the inverse of a lot of the West, other countries in the West. A lot of their TV media is actually to the right rather than to the left, which is another strange fact about Australia.
Yeah, so they can their right wing parties will be fairly like not entirely clinically insane on the social and cultural stuff, but then they'll be viciously corrupt. They don't care about the environment. They, I mean, if anyone follows Friendly Geordies, which you should do, yeah, you get a good sort of mouthful of shenanigans that happen in Australia, which I don't. Well, Australia is nice to be in for now, so I wouldn't worry about it if I was an Aussie in the existential way that I'm worried about stuff that happens over here. But still, not nice.
Just don't be there when it's summer and the entire country's on fire.
Yeah, and most of our sort of poisonous hohanunus stay outdoors, whereas theirs creep into the toilets and into your shoes. And yeah, I don't need. And if you go for a swim, you've got microscopic jellyfish that can kill you. So I don't. It doesn't really tickle my heartstrings, does it?
Stay with the devils, you know.
Stay with the devils, you know. At least a puff adder makes a noise, and you can step away. So, yeah. There's another little final question, fellas. A true capitalist investor asks, says, I fear the Cape will be a subsidiary of a Euro power, so the Americans don't have to deal with the human rights issues, but reap the benefits of the Cape's metal trade. I don't think so. I think it'll end up being kind of a balance of things. I don't think there's going to be a strict sort of hierarchical relationship where some European power is going to run things. In terms of human rights violations, I think slum clearances are going to get ugly. Clearing up crime and drug trade is going to get ugly. But El Salvador's managed to find a way around that. So I think one has to sort of think, what can one get away with? Do we have the balls to try? And to just go for it as much as possible, because if nothing ventured, nothing gained, and you don't want to be a second South Africa. You want to actually make a proper go of it, and we have a chance. Of course, all of these things are it's trying to pass through a narrow little window, and there's so many such hurdles that go into the future for us, and we're going to keep having to hit those hurdles. But it's one of those things where you have to make it, because if you don't make it, you don't make it. This is not it's not about sort of blundering through and it'll be all right. No, this is real stakes stuff, so yeah, I'm be a pessimist but with a positive attitude.
Yeah. Well, on that note, let's probably bring an end to the show tonight. Hopefully we can get it to be more regular now over the next few weeks. We did have that slight 2-week delay, but hopefully the show will be back to normal. But hopefully everyone enjoyed it, and remember to like and share this video.
Like and subscribe. Smash that like button. I really hate doing these things. But anyway, yeah, like and subscribe if you want. I'll see you next week.